2016. If you want to follow us on Twitter, please go to CATEX TV. There was another strong earthquake in Ecuador today, about 1 month after the big earthquake struck the same area. This morning's quake was a 6.7. It shook the western area of the country. There's no information yet on the extent of the damage. However, electricity and water was cut off, and people had been running in the streets as a result of the shaking. The president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, wrote on Twitter that there were no early reports of damage. He said areas of Manabí and Esmeraldas are partially without power, but it's coming back. The 7.8 earthquake that struck on April 16th devastated the country. Some 560 schools were destroyed, close to 10,000 buildings were destroyed, and thousands of people remain homeless. Lloyd's chairman John Nelson has taken off the gloves in the discussion about the pending Brexit vote. Nelson and Lloyd strongly support a Remain vote, having the UK stay in the European Union. Yesterday, in a speech, Nelson labeled politicians campaigning for Britain to leave the EU as irresponsible. He said he felt compelled to respond to some of the claims being made by the Leave campaign about the potential consequences of an exit. He said it's irresponsible for politicians to pretend that the benefits of a single market can be replicated outside the EU. He said in our case, if we were to leave the EU, we would have no right of access to the EU markets without signing up to EU regulations. He said that it would be unrealistic to expect the United Kingdom to be able to put itself in the same position as countries under an EU bilateral agreement when negotiating trade deals. He said many of the assertions being made by those have little up-to-date working knowledge of trade relationships and agreements, something which our team at Lloyd's is involved in every day of the week. He added that no regulatory nirvana would be achieved by exiting the EU, as there would be no less regulation at all. Meanwhile, in breaking news, the Chief Risk Officer and General Counsel of Lloyd's, Sean McGovern, is going to leave Lloyd's after 20 years at the corporation. This news was just released this morning. He's going to take up a role at XL Catlin. At XL Catlin, McGovern will take on the newly created role of Chief Compliance Officer. He will report directly to CEO Mike McGovern. So with immediate effect, McGovern will no longer be involved in syndicate-specific activity at Lloyd's. He will go on gardening leave in July and take up his new role in November of 2016. Meanwhile, Kurt Karl, a well-respected chief economist at Swiss Re, said that in the last 10 years, the global natural catastrophe losses have totaled about $1.7 trillion. Some $1.2 trillion of that were uninsured. He said that the global cat property protection gap has in fact increased steadily over the last 10 years. He said the highest protection gap is for earthquakes. He said 90% of earthquake losses are uninsured. In fact, in the state of California, only 90% of homes are insured against, in the state of California, 90% of homes are not insured against earthquake loss. So sometimes these problems transcend emerging markets. There was another explosion in Istanbul this morning, injuring 4 people, being blamed on ISIS. Turkish authorities apparently have sent out a warning to police in all of the country's 81 provinces, warning that there may be further attacks from the Islamic State in the days to come. According to the warning, which was obtained by a Turkish newspaper, the Turkish National Intelligence Organization raised the possibility of an ISIS attack in Ankara, the capital, tomorrow during the Youth and Sports Day. The warning went on to say that 10 ISIS militants have crossed into Turkey through the southeastern province of Gaziantep and are now planning 10 attacks in metropolitan areas, especially in Ankara. Earlier today, massive mudslides came down a hill after torrential rains in Sri Lanka. Crashed down on 3 villages. Hundreds of families are missing. As of this point, only 27 are confirmed dead, but this death toll is expected to skyrocket. Mitsubishi Motors has announced that its president, Tetsuro Aikawa, will step down in the wake of the company's emission test fixing scandal. The car maker has already admitted that it was falsifying fuel efficiency tests for decades. Their share price has dropped by more than 50%. Fellow car maker Nissan has moved in to take a controlling stake in the company. Meanwhile, it was announced that Suzuki, another Japanese car maker, has said that it found discrepancies in its fuel and emissions testing but denies cheating. The company said its testing method for 16 models was not in line with official regulations, but it insisted that new tests showed no new need to amend the data. In a talk yesterday at a risk managers conference, the risk manager of U.S. airline JetBlue, a gentleman named Lee Garvin, called on the U.S. government to take a more prominent role to help offset the potential impacts of cyber attacks. He said the government should respond if the attacks come from sovereign states and start attacking companies such as JetBlue Airlines. He called on the U.S. government to be able to intervene if need be. He said, should a sovereign state undertake an attack on JetBlue, he questioned whether or not that was truly an attack on a particular company, or in fact an attack on the United States itself. Mr. Garvin has a point. It's a discussion point that keeps coming up as this cyber discussion keeps unfolding. Eventually, the government is going to have to recognize that an attack on a company's servers or technological infrastructure is the same as it would be as if an attack was made on a physical installation such as an oil well or an oil platform or an offshore factory somewhere. That's the news for today. If we have any breaking news, we'll come back and tell you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.